Zara Aleena never saw the danger coming, and Aaron Mills never planned to let her go. A chilling obsession turned a peaceful walk home into a nightmare no one could have imagined. Aleena was the kind of person everyone seemed to trust. She was only 27 years old, living alone in a small, quiet flat in East London, where the neighbors would sometimes wave to her as she stepped out each morning for a jog. She worked at a local charity, spending her days helping people in need, and she dreamed of one day launching her own business that could make an even bigger difference. To her family, she was brave and determined. To her friends, she was the one who would listen without judging. Zara was known for her calm nature and her confidence, never afraid to stand up for herself, never afraid to take a different path. Her routine was simple and peaceful, filled with work, family visits, and long conversations with her closest friends. On weekends, she would sometimes treat herself to a slice of cake at the cafe down the street. It was a life she had built with care, a life that made her feel safe and secure. One warm summer evening, Zara was invited to a friend's birthday party. The group laughed and danced, celebrating late into the night. Zara was happy, but decided to leave early so she could get enough rest before her morning jog. It was only a 15-minute walk back to her flat, and the street seemed familiar, quiet and harmless. She had walked them hundreds of times before. There was no reason to be afraid, no reason to think something might go wrong. She slipped out of the party, waved goodbye, stepped into the soft glow of the streetlights. As she walked, the air felt warm against her skin, and a light breeze carried the smell of flowers from nearby gardens. Her footsteps echoed faintly on the pavement. She listened to the sounds of the city winding down for the night, the distant hum of cars, the occasional bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves. Everything seemed ordinary and calm. She kept her keys in her hand, just out of habit, and scrolled through her phone to check the time. No one could have imagined that Zara would never make it home that night. Somewhere along that familiar stretch of road, something shifted. A danger she could not see and would never have expected was waiting for her. It was a danger that had been watching, hidden in the background of her normal life. The person who would end her future had been closer than anyone could have guessed. The next hours were a terrible mystery. Zara did not answer her mother's goodnight call. Her friends assumed she had gone straight to bed. Unaware that her phone lay shattered on the ground, its screen blinking hopelessly in the dark. Somewhere near a broken fence, Zara's last moments played out in a way that no one would ever want to imagine. There were no screams loud enough for someone to hear. No cameras close enough to see what truly happened in the space of a single night. Everything Zara had built, everything she had dreamed of was stolen from her. A gentle, hopeful life was about to be turned into a haunting true crime mystery that would shock her community and leave her loved ones. Searching desperately for answers, the first light of morning revealed a horror that no one was prepared to face. A local man walking his dog near a neglected park spotted something strange behind a broken wooden fence. At first, he thought it was just a pile of discarded clothes, but as he got closer, the awful truth became clear. Lying motionless on the damp ground was the lifeless body of Zara Aleena, her clothes torn, her face bruised, and her phone smashed nearby. Panic spread through him, and he called the police with shaking hands. Within minutes, officers arrived, securing the area with yellow tape and trying to push back the curious onlookers who had started to gather. The scene was deeply unsettling. Zara's belongings were scattered, yet nothing obvious appeared to be stolen. Her jewelry remained untouched. There were no clear footprints leading away, no immediate suspects lurking nearby. It looked savage and personal, far beyond a simple robbery. The officers on the scene could hardly believe the level of violence. It was as if someone had completely lost control, turning a quiet night into something monstrous. Word of Zara's death traveled quickly through the neighborhood. Friends who had seen her at the party just hours before were stunned into silence, unable to accept that she was gone. Her family, notified by police, arrived at the scene only to break down in tears. Their grief was raw, and the pain seemed to drain the color from their faces. Zara had been full of dreams and kindness, and now she lay in a sealed black bag, robbed of everything she had hoped for. Detectives knew they had to move fast before clues vanished. They carefully documented every detail, collecting fibers, hairs, and a trace of blood that did not match Zara's. They hoped it belonged to her attacker, a tiny piece of evidence left behind by chance. Crime scene investigators combed the area for hours, crawling on their hands and knees through the overgrown grass, determined not to miss anything. As the investigation continued, the police tried to build a picture of Zara's final moments. Witnesses recalled seeing her leave the party, cheerful and calm. Nobody noticed anyone following her or acting suspiciously. It was as if the attacker had emerged from nowhere, striking with terrible precision before vanishing again. The lack of an obvious motive left the detectives troubled. Why would someone target Zara, a woman who had no enemies and lived such a peaceful life? When Zara's autopsy was completed, it revealed bruises and defensive wounds, telling a story of a struggle that must have been fierce and desperate. Under her fingernails, the forensic team found tiny bits of skin, suggesting she had clawed at her killer, fighting until her last breath. It was a heartbreaking but vital clue, one that could eventually lead to answers. By that evening, news outlets were reporting Zara's murder, sharing photos of her smiling face and describing her as a rising star in her community. Fear and anger spread among neighbors, who worried that a violent killer was still roaming free. The police promised to bring whoever was responsible to justice. But as darkness fell again over the crime scene, the question on everyone's mind was painfully clear. Who would want Zara Aleena dead? Detectives pushed forward with their investigation, refusing to let Zara's death become just another statistic. The entire neighborhood felt shaken, people locking their doors a little tighter, looking over their shoulders as they walked home. Officers went door to door, asking if anyone had seen something suspicious on the night Zara was killed. Most neighbors were asleep or had heard nothing. But one security guard from a nearby warehouse offered a fragile thread of hope. He remembered seeing a shadowy figure walking quickly away from the direction of the park around the time Zara would have passed through. This sighting encouraged detectives to search for security footage. They collected hours of video from local businesses and street cameras, piecing together a timeline. Finally, on a grainy recording from a small convenience store, they found something chilling. Zara could be seen walking alone, calm and unaware. Behind her, half hidden in the glow of a street lamp, was a figure wearing a hood, head lowered to avoid the cameras. The image was blurry, impossible to identify clearly, but it was enough to prove she had been followed. Investigators now knew they were dealing with someone who had planned this attack, someone who had studied Zara's habits. It no longer looked like a random act. The idea that Zara had been deliberately targeted made the case even darker. Police analysts slowed down, the video frame by frame, hoping to catch a glimpse of the attacker's face, but the hood kept it hidden. There was no way to tell who they were. At the same time, forensic scientists were rushing to process the evidence collected from the crime scene. The tiny scrap of skin under Zara's fingernails was carefully analyzed, revealing a male DNA profile. It didn't match anyone in the National Crime Database. That meant the killer had no previous record, making the search even harder. Detectives began to consider the possibility that Zara's killer was someone completely ordinary. It's when no one would suspect. The pressure to solve the case mounted as the media broadcast updates every evening. The community demanded answers, their fear growing with each passing day. Police asked for help from the public, urging anyone with information to come forward. Anonymous tips trickled in, most of them leading nowhere, but the team refused to give up. They built a timeline of Zara's last movements, retracing every step she had taken that night, trying to understand how and why she had become a target. It was a painstaking process. It's frustrating and slow, but then came the first breakthrough. A small bloodstain found on a shard of Zara's broken phone matched the same male DNA from under her nails. That meant the attacker had injured himself during the struggle. Detectives felt a renewed sense of urgency. Somewhere in the city, there was a man with fresh cuts or scratches on his hands, hiding terrible secrets. The investigation took on new energy as officers spread out to check hospital records and urgent care visits. They looked for men who had come in with unexplained injuries after the night of the murder. Each new lead felt like a possible key to the truth, but time was slipping away, and the city was holding its breath. wondering if a dangerous killer would ever be unmasked. Days passed in a blur of evidence, reports, witness interviews, and long hours of frustration. Then, a match changed everything. The DNA profile from under Zara's fingernails and from the blood on her phone finally connected to a man named Aaron Mills through a private ancestry database. Aaron was a 30-year-old IT technician who lived just 2 streets away from Zara. He had never been arrested, never even had a parking ticket, and was described by neighbors as polite, quiet, and a little shy. His clean background made the connection seem almost unbelievable, but the science was clear. Investigators now had a name, and a quiet sense of dread settled over them as they prepared to bring him in. Aaron was picked up without incident as he left work, carrying a laptop bag and wearing an expression of mild confusion. He seemed calm, even polite, as officers explained he needed to answer questions. At first glance, he did not fit the image of a brutal killer. There was no sign of aggression, no trace of panic. But when detectives searched his small, tidy apartment, what they found painted a chilling story. Hidden behind cleaning supplies in his kitchen cupboard was Zara's missing handbag, the contents still inside. It was an item only the killer could have possessed. A deeper search revealed more disturbing discoveries. On Aaron's computer, police found a string of unsettling online searches: how to follow someone without being seen, how to erase footprints, how to hide DNA. These searches were carefully bookmarked, suggesting a level of planning that made even veteran detectives uneasy. The polite, a soft-spoken man who lived in their community had been quietly researching how to hunt and avoid capture. Aaron claimed he had nothing to do with Zara's death, saying he found her bag on the street and took it home. But his injuries told a different story. Small scratches and healing cuts lined his hands, matching the struggle described in Zara's autopsy report. Faced with this evidence, Aaron went silent, refusing to answer any further questions. For the detectives, a horrifying picture was coming together. Aaron had watched Zara for months as she jogged past his window each morning. He became obsessed with her, convinced they were meant to be together. Now that night, seeing her alone after the party, he followed her under the cover of darkness, hoping to finally speak with her, to make her see him. But something went horribly wrong. When Zara resisted, Aaron snapped, unleashing violence so brutal that even he could barely explain it. News of Aaron's arrest shocked the neighborhood. Those who knew him struggled to accept that the mild-mannered man they'd passed on the street was capable of such monstrous acts. Zara's family felt torn apart once more, hearing how she had been watched, how someone had fixated on her in secret until it turned deadly. The community's fear turned to anger. A woman who had trusted her surroundings, who had worked to help others, was destroyed by a neighbor who had been hiding in plain sight. As Aaron waited for trial, people struggled to understand how someone so normal on the outside could carry such darkness inside. The horror felt worse because it had come from right next door, proving that sometimes the greatest dangers live closest to home. Aaron Mills sat in a courtroom packed with journalists, neighbors, and Zara's devastated family. The trial was swift but emotionally charged, with the jury listening in stunned silence as the prosecution laid out the disturbing details. They described how Aaron had spent weeks studying Zara's routine, tracking her movements, and searching for ways to follow her without being seen. His twisted fascination had grown quietly, unnoticed, until it finally erupted into violence on a night when Zara was simply walking home. Evidence spoke louder than any words Aaron could offer. The DNA under Zara's fingernails, the scratches on his hands, and the chilling internet searches formed an unbreakable chain of proof. Zara's handbag, hidden inside his kitchen cupboard, stood as a final silent witness against him. Aaron's attempts to claim he had only wanted to talk to Zara fell apart when confronted with the brutality of the attack. Her injuries showed she had tried to fight back, desperate to survive. There was no chance this had been a misunderstanding or an accident. Zara's family listened to every detail, faces pale with grief, holding each other for comfort. The reality of what had happened to her felt impossible to bear. They had lost a daughter, a sister, a friend, to a neighbor who had decided she belonged to him. Her mother described in a victim's statement how she still called Zara's phone sometimes, unable to accept that no one would ever answer again. The words broke the hearts of everyone in the courtroom. When the jury returned their verdict, there was no hesitation. Aaron Mills was found guilty of Zara's murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called him a dangerous predator who had destroyed a young woman's future and shattered her family. Aaron showed no emotion as he was led away, disappearing behind the heavy wooden doors with the same blank expression he had carried since his arrest. Outside the courthouse, the community tried to heal. Vigils were held in the park where Zara's life was taken, candles flickering in the evening breeze. Flowers piled up against the broken fence, a small attempt to reclaim the place from horror. Zara's friends and relatives set up a foundation, in her name, hoping to teach women how to stay safer and to support families devastated by violence. They refused to let Zara's story fade away, determined that some good would grow from so much pain. The case left scars on everyone who had known her. Many neighbors struggled to trust again, haunted by the thought that someone they thought was harmless had been capable of such evil. Zara's murder showed them that threats could hide behind friendly smiles and quiet greetings, and that no place was truly free from danger, though Aaron would spend the rest of his life in prison. The loss of Zara could never be undone. Her memory became a symbol of strength, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, a community could stand together and demand justice. The story of Zara Aleena, taken too soon by someone who watched from the shadows, would echo long after. The trial was over, reminding everyone that no one is ever completely safe, even on the streets they call home.